Well, to kick it off, thank you for making some time for this today. What time is it where you are, by the way? I know you're quite far away from me. I'm in Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm in Germany, so it's 3:30 in the afternoon.
Oh wow, that's so cool that we're getting more and more guests on the show that are from abroad. I spoke to someone from Dubai yesterday.
Oh,
I
really?
spoke to
Oh, so
another, yeah.
cool.
It's been amazing kind of seeing how far-reaching this community is, but also how many people know each other abroad. So
Yes.
thank you so much for joining me on this, for sharing your insights today. And I always like to start by asking, because it seems to be everyone's favorite part of what we're doing here, is just a little bit about your career journey. How did you get into the role you're in now? You have a really cool organization that I have tons of questions about, and I'd love to know when your next webinar is so that anyone watching this can jump in and check that out. I know the last one was on the 15th, so hopefully you have
Yeah.
another one coming up soon. But, before we kind of get into me asking you questions, Susan, do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey so far and some of the highlights or stops you've made along the way to get to where you are today?
Yeah. So to kind of give people a bit of context, I am a career coach now today, but I wasn't always a career coach. I took a lot of detours. But I always like to tell people don't feel like you took the wrong path or that you went in the wrong direction. It's kind of try to think of your path really as a winding road. So talking about detours, I usually like to joke I take the scenic route all the time.
Nice.
So I actually I was a child that was always super determined and knew what she wanted to do. So already at 11 years old, I knew I wanted to be a journalist.
Oh, wow.
Um, and it didn't change. And I went to university, I majored in journalism, I became a journalist.
Wow.
Um, and when you work for a dream or a goal for so long, you can be a bit lost afterwards.
Yeah.
So I remember thinking, what now? What next? I reached the dream.
Huh.
And I love journalism. I still do. I very much am passionate about news and knowing what's going on in the world, and I think it's a very honorable career.
Absolutely.
But at some point, for me, it got hard because a lot of the news can be negative. It also got hard in terms of the salary isn't always the best paid, depending on where you work and how much you can advocate for yourself in certain organizations and the hours. If
Yeah.
there's something going on at 2 in the morning, well, you have to get up and put on clothes and go out and cover it.
Right.
And so I just found as time went by that it was no longer really fitting with me and what I wanted to do. So I didn't really make a conscious decision to change my career. I just said, well, lots of people I know go from journalism to marketing PR. I'll do that.
Okay.
And I kind of fell into that. Um, did that for a little bit, but I didn't really find that it was something that was really fulfilling, like soul filling. I could do it, but I really wanted to still do something that was helping people, informing people, uh, and I fell into to career coaching essentially. It was something I was already doing on the side a lot.
Wow.
I taught myself how to get jobs, how to interview, how to do a resume, what recruiters were looking for. And then I was having lots of friends ask me, and then it was friends of friends asking me. And it wasn't until a friend told me when I was saying about how I wasn't really happy with marketing that they said, this like side thing you do where you're helping all these people with their resume, that's a job, right?
Yeah.
And I just had never thought about it before that
Yeah.
helping people kind of find their career path was a job and was a full-time job and was something that I enjoy and something that I could do, um, yeah, as full-time as a job. So that's kind of how I got here today.
Oh, that is so cool, Susan. And I've already got a couple questions just based on your story so far because I think the first part of your journey is what everyone expects that they should be doing. They should kind of know what they want to
Yeah.
do young, work really hard for it. leave school and then you're doing that thing. And then it's kind of like the movie ends, right? And no one really thinks about what happens after that. So I'm really glad you mentioned it, that, you can kind of reach that point and then still, want to change, or something
Yeah.
happens and you decide that's not what you want anymore. And I'm kind of curious, how long did you do journalism before you kind of recognized that? Like, how long were you in the field?
Um, about 3 years before I realized that yeah, I enjoyed it, but and I think that's something too we don't often distinguish. We can enjoy something, but doing it as a job can mean something completely different.
So
Um,
true.
and
So true.
so I often tell people, those people that are starting university and they don't even know what to major in, I say, don't worry about it. Just pick something that you know you're going to enjoy studying. You can always go into something else later. Um, and then there's people like me that know what they want to do, but end up changing. I read an article that said that Gen Zs will change their career more than 10 times in their lifetime.
Wow.
And it's not shocking if you think about it, because the world is changing and people are no longer tied to what they start out doing. There's so many different things, there's so many transferable skills. So it's amazing what you can become if you work towards it and allow yourself to dream essentially.
Yeah, I find that so reassuring, and I'm lucky my parents have been that way. I've kind of seen them go from one career. My father started as an accountant. He then decided he wanted to spend more time with our family. He opened a martial arts school, and just recently, after 20 years of running that school, him and my mother moved to New York, and now they're running a
Oh.
campground. And I think, it's so interesting that at any
And you see
stage
it
in your
just,
life.
yeah, exactly.
So I'm really glad you mentioned that. And something else you mentioned, that it's funny, people just have a way, and it's the way you just said this that really clicked for me, that you can go to school for just something you enjoy and kind of figure out what happens next after. Because isn't that the story so many times, is that people will say, well, I did a degree in, veterinary technician services and now I'm a marketer, or I did a degree in marketing and now I'm
Exactly.
this. You have such a good point, that you could just study something you enjoy and grow and learn, and then you don't have to have it. I'm doing this so I can become an engineer, or I'm doing business so I can become this. That's so helpful, Susan.
And I
Um,
think it takes off pressure off people, especially right when you're asked
it
at
does.
17, 18, applying for university, what do you want to do with your life? And people get stressed, and there's actually no reason to stress. It's just about going to university to further increase your education about the world around you and learning more about different subjects. But those things that you learn in university, you have transferable skills that you can apply to whatever you decide to do later on.
Well, it's kind of like goes back to what you're saying with the journalism, right? I feel like that ability to approach people and ask questions and that type of thing must have paid off big time as you started to
Yeah.
do job searching and your sort of next line of work here. And I am curious, what sort of things, because you said that you started career coaching on the side, but also that you kind of discovered strategies that worked for you along the way. What sorts of things did you notice as you were job searching yourself, that were, what was working, what wasn't working.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people that have done a job search before um, don't have been frustrated, have been to the point, I'm
Yeah.
applying for so many things online. How come I'm not hearing back? Or how come I'm getting a rejection? I just applied an hour ago. How did they already have time to review my application?
Oh,
And so I started talking to recruiters. This was like the journalist in me. Why
oh,
something's going on here? What's going on? So I started reaching out to recruiters and saying, "Hey, can I chat? I'd love to buy you a coffee." And so I started buying recruiters coffee so that I could find out how their processes work, how they're hiring people, how are they looking for people, and I found out all about the internal systems they use to scan and track resumes. I
yeah.
learned all about how they decide who to invite for an interview versus who they don't. And from there, I started realizing, oh wow, I'm marketing myself and how I'm putting myself out there is not at all in alignment with what recruiters want. So really it's from the basis of going straight to recruiters and finding out more about their processes and how, and that's how I pretty much tailored myself to put it into this nice little package that they wanted. And then I started sharing this information with other people.
Well, that's again just such an interesting use of your journalism skill, in the next phase of your life. And I think people sometimes discount the skills they've developed along the way, and they think that if they learn one
Yeah.
thing, that it can only be used for one thing. But that's such a good example of that skill being something that now has probably helped hundreds and thousands of people, as you've kind of said, that you've been able to work with just by asking those questions. Um, it makes a ton of sense to, and it is learning about systems like ATS and that kind of thing. These
Yeah.
applicant tracking systems, for those watching that may not know about them, that make a difference. If you don't know that, it's really difficult to understand. Yeah, how could you get a rejection letter in an hour? Um,
Yeah, and some people have told me before, no, you don't understand. I applied at midnight, and at midnight 05, I got a rejection email, and I'm trying to explain, yeah, it's an automated rejection email. You're trying to explain from the start, this is ATS. This is because they have it set up to where there's an automated rejection process when you don't meet enough of their criteria. And they're saying, but I'm a perfect fit. I don't understand how I could be automatically rejected. And you have to explain these concept of keywords. So a lot of it is just one, telling people what they need to know about all the systems that are working behind the scenes when it comes to getting a job, and then helping them to put themselves kind of in this box, in this package that recruiters are looking for. I always tell people it's not about not being yourself. You should always be yourself. You should always show up as yourself, but it's just explaining yourself in a way that recruiters are going to understand.
That makes a ton of sense, and that's what I was gonna ask you. How many times, do you see people that are qualified and would be a good fit for the job
All
that
the time.
don't kind of portray themselves in a way that's going to get them, an interview?
And that's the thing. Um, that's a lot of the problem, is that we don't know. A lot of us are still doing resumes how we were taught in high school, or maybe from one person who told us how to do it, or we copied our mom's resume. I mean, really, we just learn. We learn wherever we pick it up from so many different people on the go, and we don't actually. No one actually teaches us how important it is to have a resume in a certain format, in a certain way. Nobody actually explains to us um, kind of a recruiter's role. A lot of people don't even know the difference really between HR, human resources, and recruitment. And in some companies, it's grouped together. Um, but for a long time, it's just been called HR, human resources. And so people don't really understand that differences. Sometimes people don't even understand the different rounds of interviews that you typically go through.
Right.
Um, it it's getting, there tends to be more and more rounds these days of interviews, whereas sometimes further back in the 10, 20 years ago, maybe you would have one, maybe two rounds of interviews, but you weren't going to have more. Um, I sometimes hear people having 8 rounds of interviews. Whether I think that's ethical, that's another
Yeah.
topic. But you have to be prepared knowing that some of these companies will ask you to do something like 7, 8 rounds of interviews.
Right. And I'm starting to see other things become involved in the interview process, like sample projects or,
Mhm.
coding tests and things like that. Um, that yeah can be stressful, and people aren't aware that that can be part of the interview process. um
Yeah.
I have one more resume question. Just you reminded me of something here, just with the way things are changing, and now that people are becoming more aware of these applicant tracking systems, and now that AI can help people on the resume side of things, do you see the resume um format changing, or do you see any new requirements for job seekers like coming up in the future, or ways that people can showcase their skills and that type of thing, if um Yeah, the resume gets superseded in any way.
Yeah, so I think the number one thing is that we do tend to see different trends. So it does somewhat vary depending on where you are, but we are starting to see more design and more color on resumes. This is not me telling you don't put color and put not and don't put like don't have something design or stylish, but keep in mind the more design that you have because you buy a template somewhere or you use a free template, that might not be a template that can be scanned accurately by an applicant tracking system. So it's actually better if you have a more simplistic format um, than some of these others out there for applicant tracking systems. I tell people if it's on your website or you have it uploaded somewhere just for people to view, yes, it can be very designer, stylish, pretty, but keep in mind that there's about 4 or 5 major applicant tracking systems companies out there, and not all of them work exactly the same way. Some are more sensitive than others, some pick up and read better than others. We don't know always which ATS is on the back end of a company. So, with
That's
that, we're
fair.
not quite sure how well your designed resume is going to be viewed. So I usually tell people try to keep it simplistic. You can add a bit of color, just make sure there's still a strong contrast between the colors so that people can read it, be more accessible. Um, when it comes to content and things to put, I always, my number one thing that I often see people do is actually stuff it. Because we try to tell people keep it 1 to 2 pages max. Most of the time, I tell people don't even do 2 pages because recruiters don't have time to read 2 pages. They're looking for key information. So you should only be putting information relevant to that job that you're applying for. If it's
Right.
not relevant, go ahead and take it off. If you don't have that much stuff because you're a new graduate, then you can have a bit more space to put a hobby section or to put some of the activities you were involved in. But definitely, if you've been working for a while, um, less is more. Let's not overcrowd because then you can definitely turn off a recruiter just by them looking and saying, oh, I really don't want to read this. This is super long.
Right. Or you see something that's irrelevant and that's the first thing you see and you're like, oh, never
Yeah.
mind.
Oh
Um,
yeah, order is extremely important. If you're applying for a job as a marketer, and then the first role that I see is that you're a server at a restaurant, as a recruiter, having my recruiter hat on, I would say, I'm looking for a marketer. I'm not looking for someone that knows how to work in a restaurant.
right.
Next. And that's why it's really important then to showcase if you've done projects in marketing, those should go above the experience that maybe you're actually working in now. So the information most relevant to the job you're applying for should be as close to the top as possible.
That makes a ton of sense. Just simple, right? These are just other people eventually looking at it. And, it makes sense. The easier it is for them, the better chance you have.
Exactly.
And you also mentioned, if it's on your website, which I think is something that um, I'm hearing more and more people do. And there's been a couple of times people have interviewed for jobs at our company and they have a portfolio or a website and it really stands out. And are you noticing that as well? Is that becoming more popular?
Yes, it is coming more popular. And I would say not even about popular in some industries and some roles, it is a requirement. If you
Oh,
don't have some type of website, some type of portfolio, you look unprepared. So depending on what people are going into, I tell them you really need a portfolio website. You really need to have your presence online. You need to show some of your previous work, even if it's school projects. It needs to be there because it needs to look like you already are set up as a professional.
yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that it can be school projects because some of the applicants I've seen, it is their school projects, but you're like, oh,
Mhm.
like this is how they work, and you get that snapshot of let's
Yeah,
bring this person
absolutely.
in and see more because you just have something you can look at. So that
But
makes a ton of sense there.
yeah.
Um,
And not every school is alike, right? So that's why it's
yeah,
good, even if it is a school project, that people when they do look over someone's portfolio, they can have an idea actually how much they did within a school project. Some school projects are small task assignments out of a book or something. Others, it's you're going to work with this real company. You have to partner with three people in the class to also do it, and you're going to put together a whole ad campaign. Go.
Okay.
And so some people actually work really hard on a lot of their school projects, and that's what's important to show off so that you can give the recruiter and the hiring manager an idea of actually what you're capable of doing.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Susan. I think, again, a lot of the students and new grads I speak to completely discount the work they've done in class and think, I have no professional experience. I have nothing to show. So it's a really helpful reminder to say no, like that all that hard work is worth showing off.
Yeah.
Um, I know we're coming so close on time, and I could ask you 1,000 more questions. So I'm going to try to keep it to just two more here. One about the interviews, because you spoke about, all these different stages that might be coming a job seeker's way, and the other just about being a business owner. Um, so on the interview side of things, what are you noticing gets people stuck most often? What's kind of the thing that people might be doing wrong when it comes to the interview part of the process that they might not be aware of? Kind of similar to what we were talking about the resume,
Mhm.
where it could be stuffing it or formatting it in a way it can't be read. Does anything come to mind for the interview process in the same way?
Yeah. One is that as a part of what I was saying earlier, there are different stages. A first interview, it very much depends, of course, on from company to company, from organization to organization, but most will have some sort of screening interview. And this is most always with someone within recruitment, or if it's a smaller company, someone within HR. But there's always usually someone that talks to the person more so to learn. I always joke, it's to make sure you're a more normal person. You're not too out there. You seem
Right,
like you could fit within their company. And it's kind of to test your soft skills. How well do you communicate? How well can you answer questions? Do you show up on time? Do you look professional? So
right,
it's the first screening interview is a lot about that. Um, a lot of times people don't realize what that's for, and they come in expecting it to be very hard-hitting technical questions from the person that's going to be their boss if
uh,
they get the job. Um, Something I find that really irritates recruiters is because, again, as just a job seeker, you might not realize because you don't understand the process. But one of our biggest faux pas we do when we're job seekers is we go in and they say, "Do you have any questions?" If you say no, and you say, "No, I think I'm good. Thank you so much for the interview," they think you're not interested in the job.
right,
That's in like one of the immediate write-offs that they say, "Ooh, that person had no questions, and we don't want to hire them. We want someone that's excited about the job and that wants to ask more." Um, so you should always be prepared to, I always say, prepare three questions before you go in to be able to ask that recruiter. On the flip side, though, you have to be very careful. Do not ask questions about the job itself. So people want to usually know who else is on the team, who does this, who in this role, who would I be working with, what kinds of projects would I be doing. The recruiter, unfortunately, doesn't usually know that because the organization can be so large. They usually just have the basics of the job that they're trying to fill. They don't have the ins and outs of how that team functions or how that hiring manager works. And so when you ask a whole bunch of questions related to the role and the job itself, the recruiter then feels a bit annoyed because they just have to keep telling you the same thing. I can't really answer that question. So those three questions that you prepare in your first, before you go to your first interview, ask more about the company culture. Are what what kinds of things does the company do? Do they have any kind of mentorship program between older, more senior people within the company and more juniors? Do they have any kind of volunteer day set up at the company? on Fridays, is it casual Fridays, or does everyone bring their dog on Fridays? Whatever it may be, ask them kind of about their company cultures and attitudes and values. Something else that you can also ask is one of my personal favorites. Ask the recruiter what is their favorite part about the company, because maybe their favorite part about the company would be the same as yours, but it also could be a good indicator if not. So, for example, I think so. One person I know that went to an interview and asked a recruiter this. The recruiter said, "Oh, I love that we all can work from home." Um,
Oh,
and for the person applying for that job, that was actually a red flag for her because
oh,
she wanted to actually go into an office and work. And so she realized, even though it was advertised you could work from home or you could work in the office, the recruiter told her, I love that we all can work, that we all work from home. So actually, they still had an office, but essentially no one was going in. And so for her, she said, no, I want a very lively office space. So for me, that's not going to work. So you can actually learn a lot just by asking a recruiter what they like the most about their company.
that is super helpful, Susan. Because I remember thinking when I was applying for jobs that having no questions was like looking like I was prepared. Like, nope, I know.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, a
And you think too,
complete
and you
yeah,
no, I was just going to say also, I think you think that I know I did at least. I thought I was being polite, like, no, I didn't
yeah.
want to take up any more of their time. So no, I'm great, thank you. Um, and yeah, it's really the opposite. And I joke
Nope,
because I made
nope.
all of these mistakes before. I did all of the faux pas. I got it all wrong, and that's how I had to figure out how to do it in a certain way. So I always tell people, don't worry if you've like fudged it up somewhere. That you'll get
Yeah.
back on track now, knowing these little things.
Well, that and just knowing the kinds of questions to ask and what the recruiter knows and doesn't know is
Yeah.
super helpful. So, thank you so much for those insights, Susan. I know we're at the time I asked you for today. So I'm gonna have to save my question for hopefully the next time you come on, if you're willing to join us
Yeah.
again.
Oh yes, that'd be fantastic. I would
Oh,
love
that would be
it.
great because I have tons of questions that I think would be really interesting to folks who, have that thing on the side. And I'd love to ask you a little bit about
Yeah.
how you started your organization. But just in the interest of time today,
Mhm.
when is the next time you might be running a webinar for those who would be interested in joining and kind of continuing to hear your advice, in a format like that?
Yeah, so actually, I'm taking a pause for the moment
Okay,
with webinars, but I encourage people definitely to go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn because I'm always posting there when the next one is.
nice.
And I do plan, there is a plan in the works to have a LinkedIn Live in a few weeks.
Awesome.
So stay tuned definitely for that.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Susan. Make sure to follow Susan, everyone, to keep posted on when that LinkedIn Live might be. And really appreciate the time today, Susan. I hope you have a great rest of your day and
Yeah, of
really
course.
looking
Thank
forward to
you.
talking to you soon.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see each other soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thanks again
See you.
and have a good one.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.